It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
HSA, or health savings accounts, fund and hold strategy.
Yeah, so you've heard us talk about HSA accounts. We're going to focus on the advanced strategy available, specifically around funding and holding.
Fund and hold is your friend, because think about this. We first need to give you a little review. Why are health savings accounts so powerful? Why do we get so excited about them? And this ought to be a tool. If you have a high deductible health insurance plan, you need to have this tool in your toolbox or arsenal of just making sure you're maximizing your money. And the reason we like HSAs is that they are what's called triple tax advantaged.
Not only do you get deduction on the contribution you put into an HSA, you can actually allow those dollars in the health savings account to grow tax deferred. And then if you use it for qualified medical expenses, you can actually pull it out tax free. Yep. Triple tax advantage. There is no other investment account that has a triple tax advantage like HSAs.
The problem is you guys are leaving one of these three things on the table, and that's a disaster. I really do. So let's kind of figure out how we can fix that. But let's talk about what's the three ways that people typically use an HSA?
Yeah, so there are generally three types of people that use it. There's the kind of person who they say, you know what, I'm going to just put money in and use it right now. And honestly, I was this a number of years ago. When we had our first baby, we had a bunch of medical bills that came up. And so rather than paying the hospital directly, I put money into a health savings account and then I immediately pulled it back out to pay for the baby.
Yep.
We call that the current year slush fund. That's one type of HSA user.
You're putting the money in, you're pulling it right back out. Right. So it's just, think about this. Let's talk about each one of these. This type of person is taking advantage of the tax deduction for their contribution, and then they're immediately pulling it out for qualified health care expenses. So that's a tax-free distribution. Right. That is two of the three things. They left tax deferred nowhere in that equation. Go ahead to number two.
So now there's another set of people that say, well, I don't actually need all of my healthcare expenses. I don't use them a ton. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of my HSA dollars every year. But unlike a flexible spending account, these HSA dollars can roll year over year. So I'm actually going to still leave it in cash though, because I might need it next year. So I'm going to use this as a year over year slush fund. Yeah. So I'm going to contribute every year, but I'm going to kind of use it as needed. But I want to leave it in cash because I'm still utilizing those dollars to pay for my medical expenses.
Once again, this is another ditto situation where the person is taking advantage of the tax deduction. They're taking advantage of the tax-free distribution, but even though there is a rollover feature, they're not looking at this as an investment opportunity. So tax deferred is once again ignored. So now we get to item number three. And this is the stat. I kid you guys not. That according to, let me find it. Where is it? According to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, only 4% of HSAs had invested assets beyond cash.
What that tells me is that 96% of people are not investing their health savings account dollars. That's wild. They're missing one of the greatest benefits of compounding growth that are available inside these accounts.
There is definitely a better way. So here, let me tell you some crazy things about health savings accounts. And a lot of you guys, you're like, there's no way that's true. The IRS would not, my favorite taxing uncle would not allow you to do that with your money. And I'm going to actually read you clarification that the IRS provided so that you know that, hey, uncle's okay with this, so take advantage of this. And this is where the HSA fund and hold comes in. And I want to give you an example of a better way to do this. Well, first, let's talk about the 96%.
Okay.
I think we got to set the table. 96% of people out there let's just say you contribute right now, a family maximum that you can contribute in 2019 is $7,000. Yep. We're going to assume for the next 10 years, I know there's an inflation increase on there.
Let's just
disregard that for simplicity's sake. For the next 10 years, you're going to put $7,000 into your health savings account for your family. Every year, you're pulling out that same $7,000 to pay those qualified, medical expenses and health care and other things that are out there. So at the end of 10 years, you've put in $70,000, you've pulled out $70,000, your HSA is sitting at a big whopping zero. So let's talk about that smarter 4% that is doing the, fund and hold strategy. And this is something, I love this. I've been doing this for years and absolutely get excited talking about it, is because this is what I consider a money guy advantage, is that you're going to know about this. Believe me, if only 4% are doing it, you are hearing this for the first time. And I got to share one more tidbit about HSAs that gets me excited. These things are sleeper retirement accounts, because guess what happens? If you save into a health savings account until 65 years of age. Any of your account holdings at 65 and older can be used actually as retirement accounts.
Right.
You don't have to use it for qualified health care expenses anymore. Now you can use it actually to help you offset what expenses are in retirement, and you just pay it like an IRA.
That's what I say. It's not like the Roth anymore. It's not tax free, but you just paid normal ordinary income tax like an IRA or 401k.
So let's take that same person that did, instead of doing like 96% of people funding $7,000 for 10 years and pulling it out every year, let's take somebody who put $7,000 family contribution in for each of the next 10 years. They got a return on investment of 8%, meaning they were actually investing this money. And that's very easy. I mean, some of the big players that have jumped into the health savings account space, Fidelity recently jumped in the last few years, really cheap, really good. So you could, if you didn't reimburse yourself all at once, you let that money sit in the account. You put the $70,000 in over the next 10 years, but you earned 8% every year. Guess what happens 10 years from now? That account is actually worth $106,709. So just say $107,000.
But here's what you did. Every time you had a medical expense over that 10-year period, you saved your receipt. You put it on a spreadsheet. You scan it in. You have track of all of the money that you spent on those medical expenses over the last 10 years.
Keeping great records. So you pull, and I arbitrarily chose 10 years in the future to prove my point. But you have $107,000 essentially in this HSA account.
Right.
You could now go pull the $70,000 out that you spent in medical expenses. You would still have $37,000 of assets in your HSA that is just sitting out there growing and working for you. You ended up in the exact same place, but your money did a lot. That army of dollar bills was pretty powerful stuff. 50%.
So a lot of, and again, this is why I love having the YouTube chat going live right here. We've even had some folks say, hey, I used to do that slush fund strategy. There's some fees associated with that because a lot of HSAs have like minimum account balances or even distribution charges. That's something you want to make sure that you look into. And here's one of the other questions we had is, oh, okay, I'm in, I want to do this. What do I need to have in order to be able to open HSA? Can I just go do it tomorrow?
You got to have a high deductible health insurance plan. Just make sure, and he'll tell you even if you go on the exchange, there's usually a box where you can say HSA eligible. You just want to make sure that the plan is truly HSA eligible. But I want to give you, because a lot of you are probably getting excited. I know I get excited about this strategy. I want you now, because when you do strategies like this, you better measure twice, cut once to make sure the government really does, because you don't want to jump into something that Uncle doesn't necessarily approve of. But there's actually an IRS bulletin that came out. It's IRS bulletin 2004-33 IRB.
It sounds so nerdy.
Well, but listen to this. Here's the question. It's question number 39. This is actually on the IRS website if you want to go check me on this. But it's question 39. When must a distribution from an HSA be taken to pay or reimburse on a tax-free basis qualified medical expenses incurred in the current year?
Okay.
Here's the IRS answer to A39. An account beneficiary may defer to a later taxable year's distributions from HSAs to pay or reimburse qualified medical expenses incurred in the current year as long as the expenses were incurred after the HSA was established. Similarly, a distribution from an HSA in the current year can be used to pay or reimburse expenses incurred in any prior year as long as the expenses were incurred after the HSA was established. Thus, there is no time limit on when the distributions must occur. Kaboom! That is the IRS, our favorite uncle, giving you permission to do this.
What that says is that you can actually allow these dollars to accumulate for an entire career, an entire lifetime, and really supercharge this so that one of the things that we're so fortunate, Brian, we get to talk to all kinds of folks that are approaching retirement, getting ready to retire. A lot of them retire early. What's the one thing that we hear more than anything else that they're nervous about and uncertain of?
They're worried about dying.
How do I pay for healthcare? How do I pay for healthcare expenses? What does that look like at the end of my life? HSAs are a fantastic way to start building a pot of money for those and other costs that you're going to have in retirement.
I do want to share one other thing that I went a little above and beyond to make sure that, measured for you so you wouldn't have fallen any traps. Verify this, though. I always tell you, anything you hear on the show, verify it unless you've hired us, and then you can let us do the verifying for you. But what happens if you die? You know, because a lot of you
big one.
guys, you go start running these strategies, and then you go, well, what happens if I'm running this strategy? I have all these receipts in a folder somewhere for the last 30 years. What happens when I die? Is you need to make sure, obviously, people know about this folder, magical folder with all the receipts, or if it's uploaded somewhere out in the cloud, just to make sure people know. But your estate does have up to a year to get reimbursement from that health savings account.
Tax-free reimbursement. That's exactly right.
It's one of those things that will cause, so even death will not keep you. As long as you keep good records and somebody knows about those records, even death will not keep you from taking advantage of this incredible planning strategy.
Perfect. All right, awesome.
I feel like that one needs a high five.
Up top.